to yet another episode of Smash the Bug podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Maxwell, and I'm excited to be joined by a very special person, a senior Magento developer who has, let's just say, been through quite a little experiences in the Magento arena. We're going to hear from him as far as what he has fought through, what he has learned from over his great experience as a Magento developer. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Swift Otter Inc. You can't miss it. It's pretty easy to find on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe to that because we're constantly putting out podcasts and just related videos and things to help you become a better developer in whatever projects you are working on. As well as we are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. We are found there under the Smash the Bug podcast title. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Leon Helmus from UI. He is a senior Magento developer, and as is most often the case, senior developers carry a good degree of experience. And we are here to learn from Leon as far as some of the things he has learned from. So welcome, Leon. It's good to have you here on the show today.
Joseph. So I was
just going to say, how about we start with what's your background? Like 30 seconds of how did you get started on Magento and what brought you to becoming a senior Magento developer here today?
So started out with as an in-house with Magento 1, 2 years, and then got to UI. Started out as a meteor and finally got to senior and working on Magento 1, Magento 2, and finally also DevOps, CI/CD, everything that comes together with it. Scrum, you get familiar with everything during when you work for an agency. So,
that's really good, and I think if I remember correctly, we're going to talk a little bit about some of that stuff. So that's good. So I think what are some of the challenges? Then we're obviously going to talk about that, right? Smash the bug. We want to talk about the nitty gritty stuff, and it's fun to talk about like the big success stories, but those nitty gritty challenges. And one thing you mentioned about is you're working on a repository. If I'm understanding this correctly, is you're working on a repository, and you get more and more third party developers accessing this. And I don't know if, and I'd be curious. I guess the first question is: these more and more developers on your team, or third party, meaning like on a merchant's team?
They are a merchant's team. They are separate from us, so separate entity. We have our own team, and then we try to coordinate everything with the merchant team. And then there's another merchant team. So in total, there are like 5 parties working on the same repository. And
this is a good conversation to have. So what controls do you enforce, and who enforces those controls to make sure that good, reasonable code gets to the staging environments? So
I think the most important thing that we implemented was feature environments. Feature environments. Most of the time you have a test environment, an acceptance environment, and nothing more. But we're using like separate entities. I don't know if you're familiar with G-Cloud instances. We're using those to spin up separate features. So you have storage in Jira. That's one feature that you have to create for the merchant. And that will come on a separate G-Cloud instance. And that can then be separately tested. But if you have like a test environment and an acceptance environment, and those are the only 2 environments, and you have to deliver like in 2 weeks, like more than 70 stories, that's not really doable because one feature of the merchant's team and your feature are on the same let's say test environment, and they will collide with each other and could cause that one the feature of the merchant or my feature, for example, could have a bug or something, and you need to fix that. So that will slow down the delivery. that you'll have to do. I hope I'm saying this a bit clear.
Yes. And I think feature branches are really a brilliant idea. Magento Cloud offers that, or the Commerce Cloud, to be more specific or accurate to the vernacular there, that offers that feature. And I think it's an indication of a really well-built, tightly well-built CI pipeline to be able to handle and manage those types of environments. Are you able to talk about the bigger picture as far as how your CI pipeline handles this type of management? Just give us like a
okay. I could
overview.
give like a general view.
Yeah.
So let's say you start on a feature, you're creating that, you make a code review. We use Bitbucket for that.
Okay.
And in Bitbucket, you have like all kinds of settings that you could use. So one of the settings we're using is fast forwarding. So the only way is up. So if you commit something, it will be committed, and you need to deploy it to production or resolve the bug that's in there. The other thing is you also have merge options. So if you add a task, for example, it could prevent you from merging it to master.
Okay.
So the first step, we have a testing suite, and that generally checks the code. So most of the time, if you don't have that, you will have to say like, here needs to be a new enter, or this isn't PSR2 compatible, or whatever. But we have a testing suite for that, and it runs every time it runs a pipeline. So the first step will be check if the testing suite's testers are all positive. And if they are, they can create their own feature environment. We try to minimize the work that we actually have to do. This way, everyone can work separately, and the communication is only needed when it's really needed. After the feature environment has been created, we have quality assurance to test the code, and then also for the client to test the code as well. And
where do you get the database for those feature environments?
Yeah, we generally try to keep them updated as much as possible. It depends how often the client wants to do that. In some cases, it's a bit behind, so some features or some feature flags are behind. But we have thought of an ID, and that's just Magento basics. We're using the Magento environments. You can add PHP environments variables, and we use those to read them out. And then on the feature environment, you have the correct settings. Okay. That's generally what we do to keep the settings up to date. Okay. And we also use the N98 tooling to create a database, to generate a database dump without customer data and all that, because we think we don't want any of the merchants' data on our feature environments, because it should be clean without any extra additional customer data.
I get that. One thing I'm just going to quickly throw out here is a shameless plug, but I don't know if you've heard of our project called Driver. It's on GitHub, SwiftOtter/Driver. And actually, so we have a Magento 2 plug for that. And in it, basically the idea is a pipeline to be able to anonymize and transform databases into whatever environments you need. So like you could do one for staging, you can create a feature branch one, you can create a local one, whatever you want. And the idea is that it iterates through those and drops it up onto an S3 bucket, private, of course, and there's instructions on how to set all that up.
Yeah.
So then you can load that locally, and there's tooling as part of that to also refresh the database if that's what one wants. But anyways, if you're interested, or I'd be curious to know your thoughts. I genuinely would be curious to know your thoughts, like why or why not that would possibly work for you guys. Not now, of course, but just throwing that out.
We're basically also the fixture database that we're using for the feature environments. We also use them for the local environments.
Okay,
use the Docker setup to then grab that database. So you always, when you have a bug, you can reproduce it because you have the same database as the fixture.
That's nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, because it happens that data is just the issue. It happens way more often than it should. But like, for example, setting has not been set correctly. Yeah.
Like I tell people, there are 3 ingredients to a problem. You have the code, which for you guys, it doesn't sound like that's an issue at all. Like you have feature branches and like you have that nailed down. So the code is not going to be an issue for you.
No.
You have database and you have the environment. So based off what you're saying, the database is also not an issue. I mean, it could be if the feature branch is out of sync with production, you find the bug in production, you're trying to replicate it back on a feature branch.
It happens mostly for Magento upgrades. You want to, when testing a Magento upgrade, you want to test it on not on a feature environment. You want to test it on an acceptance environment or a test environment. This way, you get to test all the APIs that your merchant's using. Because the ERP or the PIM, they could have API calls with the Magento platform, and it is hard to test that on a feature environment.
Yeah,
because it can't be reached.
Yes, I get that. Yeah, definitely. And so, testing some of that. Actually, I'm curious. Let's talk about that real quick. So testing some of those in regular deliveries or in a Magento upgrade, that sort of thing. How do you ensure the continuity for, again, like let's just say an ERP?
Yeah.
Is that something that you guys say is testable or not testable, or like So what's your process for that?
So normally for everything, we just have an acceptance server. We don't have a test environment anymore because the test environment will be replaced by the feature environments. So for bigger merchants, you would want to have a separate acceptance server. So that would be test going back again. And you could deploy, for example, a Magento upgrade to that specific environment without conflicting it, that you could still release. So you have your test environment, you have your acceptance environment, and for the feature environments can still merge to acceptance. Then you update acceptance to test. So the upgrade will also get the latest changes, and then you can still deploy to production. This way, you keep the continuation of the process.
Okay.
I hope I answered it correctly, but
yeah, definitely. So yes, and I think definitely. So basically, so you're testing like the ERP connections, or you're testing let's just say the ERP to simplify things here.
Yeah.
You're testing the ERP in the acceptance environment before you go to production. So you have a good idea that it's working as expected.
Yeah, basically, yeah. But it would be an acceptance to environment. So because you still want to be able to release for the customer, since you have multiple merchant developers. Also, we're still working on the environment on the code, and that also need to be released because you want to have a continuity of getting stories to done. So and releasing it.
Do you have more than one acceptance environment? Or is it one?
Yeah, more than one. So We have one environment just to release or do some basic checking if it's really needed, because the feature environment is too slow for it. And we have other acceptance environment to do the more complex things like API calls, checking ERPs, connections, and that kind of thing. So this way you can always release.
One thing I'm always scared of is getting code to production that's not been vetted. And in the way we do things internally is a little bit more linear. I think feature branches could be good, will be a good thing to implement as we build out our tooling. But the feature branch, so basically, so in our case, we have the master branch, and all of our code is merged into the master branch, and the master branch is built into an archive artifact, and it's delivered to the test environment or the test acceptance environment, whatever you want to call it there. Our workflow is a little more linear. We haven't had a need yet to expand past that. And then once it is approved in the acceptance environment, it is then pushed out to production. And one of the things I like about that is that I know that code will be 100% tested on staging before it is sent to production. That's basically guaranteed. So with multiple acceptance environments, do you ever have problems with unvetted code getting to production? Like someone merges to one acceptance environment and the other acceptance environment gets pushed to production, that sort of thing. Like, does that ever happen? Or
we have, like I said before, with the code review, we have those merge blocking. I don't know the right words on how it's used, but you have like checks for your merge, and those checks generally can consist of two things. For example, it needs an approval of a default reviewer, or all assigned, or the pipeline that's done to master should also be completed and have a green mark that it's passed. So generally that doesn't really happen. It could, of course, but most of the time, I'm the tech lead of the project, and together with somebody else, and we generally release everything. So this way you never get that issue.
Got it. Okay, that's interesting, and so basically for you guys, it's dealt with through process and controls as opposed to like just only being possible, and that's an acceptable trade-off for you guys, because so that you do have that flexibility, which I can totally see that's absolutely necessary for quite a number of merchants. There's some merchants I don't think that they really need that flexibility for, smaller ones, but you get into the bigger ones and you need the ability to be able to apply quick fixes and all that stuff. And you can't apply quick fixes if all of your development is happening on the master branch. So absolutely, I get that, and it makes sense. That's actually a question I've always wondered. So I got that out of my head. So that's one reason I love these podcasts, by the way, is that I hope everybody learns from these that listens to them, but I find it tremendously valuable myself, because I'm able to ask those questions that I've always wondered the answer to. So thank you. That's good. That's awesome.
No worries.
Well, yeah, that's good. So kind of moving on to the second subject that you talked about, code review. It's been a hot point for me. It's something I like to talk about, is code reviews, getting code to production and all that stuff. So what would you say would be some of the lessons, some of your favorite topics or lessons that you have come across, problems, challenges? Well, those are my favorite things to talk about in relation to getting code to production, reviewing it, working. I'm guessing since this one project you've talked about where they have merchants, or this merchant has developers in there, working with them, because inevitably they're going to commit code that it needs some help and improvement. We've been through that situation ourselves. So what are some of the key points that you can suggest to our listeners? Because this, in my opinion, this doesn't just is not just applicable for working with a merchant's developers or other third party involved, like working with others on the team, our team. Like I'm guessing, I could be wrong. I'm going out a limb here, but I'm guessing what you're going to say here is going to be applicable for, working with other members on your team here at whatever place of work that you're at.
Yeah. So basically, before I even came here, there was a testing suite, and like I said before, we use it in a pipeline to check if the code is correct. So we don't have to check it. So I would say keep it to the important stuff. If it's code styling, resolve it in a testing suite. For example, we use grumphp for that.
Okay.
To resolve those. And I would more look at. I've seen your post about the collections. Use the collections instead of the repositories, because repositories are heavy used, or when they add, for example, database scripts that adds a column to the sales order, and for some merchants, it's not a problem because they have like a small database, but if it's like a huge one, it can have downtime. So you need to be aware of those things as well during the code review.
Well, let's go back to what you said there at the beginning of your answer. I really like what you said about the automated code reviews as much as possible, because that, in some ways, it's hard, I think, to get feedback from another human. It's like you thinking, you're saying I just wrote bad code. Like, no, I didn't write bad code. I'm XYZ. I know what I'm writing. But if it's the machine kicking that back, especially for some of the more trivial stuff, I think that's a really good point. And that's something we are working at adding tooling for ourselves, is to be able to automate some of that part of the code review, because if nothing else, it'll save you, since you're the architect, like it saves you time. You don't have to worry about those little, hey, you're missing, there's a space between your
yeah.
Like, come on, let's get that fixed. You don't have to write that up, and then especially if you're working with a merchant, be extra nice about it as well. So I get that. Okay, so that's really good.
Yeah,
and then.
Could I elaborate a bit more about that?
Please, yeah, definitely. Go on.
So, like I said, it's checking it during the pipeline, but you can already check it when you're every time you commit. For us, it's checking your code. So, even before you commit it, we just added the pipeline to make sure that the testing suite is correct, because sometimes otherwise it could happen that somebody forgets it, and you have to resolve someone else's issues, and you don't want that. So this is why we have that second layer in the pipeline. And
you say before you commit, so that's and it's been a while since I've worked with this. So in the Git directory, isn't there like a scripts folder that you can have them run pre-commit?
Yeah, Git hooks.
Is that what you guys are doing?
Yeah,
the Git hooks. Thank you.
Yeah. We're using that, and you can also it's grumphp, so you can also just run it using vendor bin grumphp run. And the nice thing about grumphp, you can add your own modules to it, so you can create your own testing suite, what you find important that needs to be checked, and of course you can also exclude things that you probably don't want in your you don't mind in your code, for example.
Nice. Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's good. I like that. That's right there. That's another great suggestion. I'm guessing it doesn't take that long to get some of that set up, and just to make sure it's up and running. Some of those tie in also with PHP Storm. I'm not sure if grumphp ties in with that.
Yeah, you have code styling. Sniffer, it's called, I think.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken.
That makes it even easier right there, right? Because you're just it's giving you feedback on the fly. Yeah,
basically, yeah. So then you'll see like a red marker that something is wrong, and they tell you a option to resolve it. So yeah, I really like PHP Star. I'm currently using it myself as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, so I think is there? I guess the question I do like to wrap up. Sometimes I forget to ask this question, but the question I like to wrap up is: if you had to give you're speaking to our audience right now. So, what would you say would be the one best and most important piece of advice you can give that will significantly help our listeners? What would you say would be that one piece of advice?
Yeah, I would say keep the communication. Communication is always key when having bigger merchants. Also thinking of creative solutions. This is also the way you're going to use better technology, more automation, better code quality, better quality assurance. So try to automate things. And there's a saying, being a lazy developer, do as less as possible. Everything you can automate, try to automate it. And you have a lot of tools in the market. So try to use those to, instead of doing 40 hours of work, doing 180 hours of work while doing nothing.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's the way to do it. Absolutely. And those tools just make your life easier. And the more you can automate and get it out there, have the machine do the work for you, it's going to be more consistent. You're not going to miss stuff. And it's going to make your life easier. And the overall quality of product will be better. So why not? But it takes time to get it set up. And that's the frustrating part.
That's always the problem.
Yep. It takes a lot of time. Awesome. Well, listen, Leon, I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your knowledge, and you definitely gained quite a little over the years, and it's been a pleasure having you here, so thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Well, it was an absolute pleasure having Leon on the show today. It's really good reminders and definitely learning. I keep forgetting about the Git hooks. Those, I've used them. PHP code style checking, Grum PHP, whatever. That's a really good use for Git hooks, and it's done automatically. You tie it into your PHP Storm, so if it's tied in, you're following your guidance in PHP Storm, you probably won't even need to ever see it before you commit. Like, it won't ever cancel out a commit, like if you're truly following it. But it's a good double check, and then building it into your pipeline. It's like, oh, Joseph, I don't have a pipeline. Well, you got to get a pipeline. Joseph, it's going to take too long. Doesn't matter. Like, your life will become a lot easier. As you heard Leon talking about this. I mean, and he's literally coming from a perspective. He's done this for years. Like, he probably doesn't even know what it's like out of pipeline. So, I mean, you just got to face this. This is going to revolutionize your life. Listen to Leon, take his advice, and just get that pipeline built. You will never look back. Let's just put it that way. So until next time, my friends, it was a pleasure being with you all. I hope you found this as insightful and helpful as I did. And if you did, make sure to subscribe to our channels. It's good talking with you.